Chairman of the Board of Housing and Community Development. I'd like to call to order today's meeting, Monday, January 25th at 10 a.m. And I'm going to turn it over to Kyle to read an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Due to the governor's declared state of emergency due to COVID-19, it is impractical and unsafe for the Board of Housing and Community Development to assemble in a single location. So the board meeting will be held electronically by video conference and telephone options pursuant to the amendments to the Appropriation Act. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue the operations of the board and discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. The public is welcome to use the link and phone number available by staff to attend electronically. The board will make available a recording or transcript of the meeting in accordance with timeframes established in the Code of Virginia. Please note, votes will be roll call. The meeting is being recorded. And at the end of the meeting, I will post a link to a survey regarding online meetings. And that is it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to turn it over to Andy Friedman, as we will start with the Housing Community Development Committee as chairman of that committee.
Thanks, Sonny. Hi, I'm Andy Friedman, and we need to call the Housing Community Development Committee to order, and Kyle will do a roll call for us.
Mr. Abbasi.
Present.
Ms. Cotton.
Present.
Ms. Dewey.
Present.
Mr. Friedman.
Present.
Mr. Gregory. Ms. Halleck.
Present.
Mr. Jackson.
Present.
Ms. Johnson. Ms. Abby Johnson.
Present. Sorry.
Mr. Keith Johnson.
Present.
Ms. Monique Johnson.
Present.
Mr. Maringoff.
Present.
And Ms. Shields. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Kyle. The first order of business is the consent agenda, starting with the approval of the minutes of September 28th, 2020. So I need a motion to approve those minutes.
So motioned.
We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Claudia and Sonny. Kyle, we need a roll call vote on that.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Abbasi.
Approved.
Ms. Cotton.
Yes.
Ms. Dewey.
Yes.
Mr. Friedman.
Yes.
Mr. Gregory. Ms. Halleck.
Yes.
Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
Ms. Abby Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Keith Johnson.
Yes.
Ms. Monique Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Maringoff.
Yes.
And Ms. Shields. Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. The next order of business is Industrial Revitalization Fund Guidelines. BHCD is proposing some revisions, so I'll turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, board members, for being with us this morning. It's good to see everyone here virtually. And I do promise you all have given so much of your time with some all-day for the development process. We do have a shorter agenda for you today, but we do, I do have quite a bit of updates I'd like to share with you during the director's report, and we'll update you in the code process later. Right now, this is the main agenda item in terms of an approval today in terms of the Industrial Revitalization Fund Guideline. Those of you who have been on the board at least 2 years will recall that there was more substantive changes made in the end of 2019 for the last guideline program year for this program, and we wanted to take a minute to have our team give you an update on, for the new board members, what this a little more about the program, an overview of what it's about. It's one of our, really a smaller program, but one of our key tools in our toolbox of community development. And it's one that this board has, is a state program in the Code of Virginia with then a budget line item at about $1.5 million a year that you all have the authority to update and change these guidelines occasionally. And so we've been doing it annually the past couple of years with some new changes. So I want to make sure to introduce a couple folks to you that if you haven't met before. Jay Grant is our Deputy Director for our Community Development Division. Rebecca Rowe is our Associate Director for our Community Revitalization Office. That Community Revitalization Office implements the Industrial Revitalization Fund, our Main Street program, Port Host Communities program, and several other efforts really focused on revitalization tools. And the broader Community Development Division also implements the Community Development Block Grant Program, Appalachian Regional Commission, and just kind of a prelude to some of the future action items. The Community Development Block Grant Program is also a really key effort that pairs well with the Industrial Revitalization Fund in terms of downtown revitalization projects, locally different projects. So that division also, you'll be seeing some updates later in the year on our annual strategy statement for how we utilize our federal Community Development Block Grant and other HUD programs that come through this board as well. So just wanted to give you that context, and really the change coming before you today is more of a minor change on the fiscal stress, but I want to make sure that Rebecca Rowe gives you an overview of the program, and then we'll get into the actual proposal before you today. That's starting on page 16 of your packet. There's a memo that describes what's before you today, and then you actually have the whole guidelines following that, and the red line changes. So with that, I want to turn it over to Rebecca Rowe. And Rebecca, thanks for being here today, and Jay, and let you give an overview.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Eric. Kyle, I'm going to go ahead and present now. Okay, well, I can't see you all anymore, so I will assume that my slides are showing at this point. The Industrial Revitalization Fund, as Eric mentioned, we have an allocation of $1.5 million a year. I will mention that for fiscal year 2021, we saw $6.8 million in requests for those funds. And the IRF program assists localities in addressing vacant and blighted structures that have contributed to the disinvestment of the property and to the surrounding neighborhood. These are remnants of past economic vibrancy that are no longer suited for their former purpose, and therefore serve as opportunities for a community to leverage local and private resources to create community development projects. And we definitely are looking for those projects that have the opportunity to further catalyze investment and development in the vicinity. Projects are awarded up to $600,000 and require at least a 1-to-1 match. And eligible properties include those formerly used for manufacturing, warehouse, mining, transportation, and power production, as well as just large-scale white elephant structures such as department stores, theaters, hotels, and shopping centers. In fact, I think theaters and hotels are frequent flyers of the program. If you are familiar with the Bowling Wilson, or the Bowling Hotel in Wytheville, Virginia, that was an IRF project that building was originally a hotel, and the IRF funds helped it become a boutique hotel that really benefits that community a great deal. IRF grants are performance-based, and outcomes are measured on the creation of jobs, development of the property into a commercial end use, and total public-private investment into the project. So we're going to specifically take a look at Beals Brewing in Bedford, and I'm going to well, we'll start with that. In 2016, Bedford County Economic Development Authority was awarded the IRF grant for the renovation of the former Hampton Looms Woolen Mill property in downtown Bedford. And Waukesha Development was the developer on that project, a 1,600 square foot building that they turned into Beals Brewery. Maybe you all have had the opportunity to visit that brewery. If not, they are distributing their beer now. And it also has a full service barbecue restaurant and was the first craft beer brewery in Bedford. There have been 30 new jobs created and $2.5 million in economic impact. And honestly, those numbers probably could be updated a little bit. I'm going to jump back to this slide because this is what the property looked like before the IRF grant. This is what the inside of that property looked like. That little snapshot there is what part of the outside of that property looks like. And here is what Beals Brewery looks like now. So you can see that this program really took what was a large scale eyesore in the community immediately adjacent to their downtown district, very visible. If you're familiar with Bedford, their Main Street area is kind of up on a hill a little bit, and this property was down below that. So it was just extremely visible. There are now new apartments in that area. Again, at the time, 30 jobs were created. Now that they have moved into distribution, my understanding is that they have more full-time equivalent positions. And because they have been able to move into distribution and canning, which really counts as small-scale production, this is a much more resilient business for this community than if they did not have the opportunity to do the small-scale production and the distribution around the state. So the IRF program is applied for by units of local government, cities, counties, or towns, but also the IDA or EDA can apply in instances where the locality maybe lacks the capacity to administer the grant. And they can apply for those funds for publicly owned properties or privately owned. So if it is a for-profit entity, the grant that is made through the program becomes a loan from the locality to that end user. If it is a nonprofit or a civic use, or a civic owner, I should say, then it is a direct grant to the locality. And each locality can only apply for one project per year. So they really have to make the determination as to what is the catalytic project in their community at that time. So I just wanted to show you all a couple of slides there. So you have a bit of a visualization of the program and how that can impact the community. And I'm available to answer questions.
So any questions on overall program, and then we'll go ahead and make sure we give you an overview of the actual change before you today. And I see Susan has a question.
Thank you. Rebecca, is this locality specific, or can it ever be regional, or multiple localities go together?
So it's only for brownfield sites, not greenfield or scattered sites. If a region participated financially in the purchase of a property and rehabbing that individual property together, it could be a regional cooperative effort, but it would be for an individual site. I'll
Nice.
also mention with this program, it really is geared towards commercial properties, but it can also be used for mixed use properties. So including some residential, as long as a minimum of 30% of the property is commercial.
Mr. Chair, I think Susan has a further question than Monique.
Oh, Susan, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, but so when you say commercial, because some refer to rental as commercial, but then you said residential. So when you're saying that, basically it have to be a mixed use type of development.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions for Rebecca or for Eric?
I have a question. Monique Johnson.
Go ahead.
So,
Lynn.
thank you. So Rebecca, you mentioned that the allocation is 1.5 million, and I think last year you got requests in the $6 million range. So I'm curious.
6.8.
Okay. So is the program typically that oversubscribed? I mean, is that pretty much the trend, that there's a lot more demand than dollars supplied? And
Yes.
you anticipate that's going to continue?
Correct. Yeah, this year our application deadline is a little later in the year, and I actually was speaking with my program manager this morning, and she said that they have already this month had 5 meetings with potential applicants, and they have 5 more scheduled. So our anticipation is that this will continue to be a very popular, very competitive program.
I'll just add on to that is that the program, I think historically was more at the $2.5 to $3 million range, and there was budget when there were past years of budget difficulties. It received some cuts. It was slated for an increase this past year, and then many of the priorities were unallotted as the budget, as the fiscal situation with the pandemic was unfolding. So there are some different budget amendments on it. We're at this moment, it's staying at proposed at $1.5 million in the governor's budget. What was added was the support host communities program, which we didn't go into today, but that's a separate kind of sub program only available to Richmond, Front Royal, Norfolk, Chesapeake, and I believe Portsmouth. And so those, communities that have these kind of projects centered around port activities, there's also a set aside that the General Assembly has. But yes, it has a huge demand. And one thing to remember too is it's one of the few tools we have in our community development portfolio that's available statewide. So we have a lot of rural, mid-sized, rural towns, mid-sized city applications, and then we also have funded major efforts in large cities. The city of Richmond with their one of their African American history museum, with Norfolk with some port. So there's a lot of demand for derelict structure, kind of key commercial rehabs, and often what happens around it is community development block grant is a tool, or other revitalization tools on housing or downtown revitalization are done around these projects.
Thank you. Sylvia has her hand up. Sylvia.
Yes, and Eric may just have answered part of my question. I think I heard you say the port cities are particularly important in this program. Is that what I heard?
Port cities have a set aside of $1 million that is in addition to the 1.5 million. So the 1.5 is for the balance of the state, and there is an additional set aside of 1 million for the 5 port host communities.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking particularly about Portsmouth. I know that with some grants, the folks who have applied before and been awarded sometimes have an advantage. Is that the case in this particular one?
In terms of the locality or the developer or the specific project?
I was thinking more about specific projects.
Yeah, for this program, because it is oversubscribed, it is not uncommon for us to not have the funding to fund some projects that are pretty great, but are not quite as ready as those that end up getting funded. So it's not uncommon for projects to come back a second year and get funding in that second year. This
Okay.
past allocation cycle, fiscal year 2021, two of the projects that were granted there, the Lyric Theater and the Millwall Theater, Lyric Theater in St. Paul and the Millwall Theater in Wytheville. It was a second application for both of those projects. And they had been able to utilize that year to really get the rest of their funding buttoned up so that they are really shovel ready. And that's something that we are really looking for, is that we're really filling that in the program.
Thank you.
Okay,
Other
thank you.
questions for Rebecca? Oh, Sylvia? Okay. Eric, you want to, or Rebecca, you going to talk about the changes to the guidelines?
Sure. I'll just start by saying, Rebecca and team worked with getting some input on updates to the fiscal stress component of the guidelines. I want to turn to Rebecca just to give an overview of what that update does.
So what we are proposing to change is the way that we calculate the distress scores, which is one of the point categories for this program. So we are proposing to really make the distress qualification here more in line with other state programs utilizing the same data, whereas previously we had been calculating our distress scores in a way that was not in line with the way CDBG was doing it in ARC and some of our other programs that take distress into account. So what we are proposing to do is just to bring this program more in line in terms of the data sets that we're using and the way that we're calculating these scores. And this is the only item that we are proposing to change in the program this year.
And I'll just add on to this great description, Rebecca. The fiscal distress, part of the program goal is to really focus on the state coming to assist where, there have been commercial districts with some disinvestment and needing that additional assistance. So while we look at readiness and the different categories of scoring you'll see in the scoring, the fiscal distress is a focus. It's a focus of our mission area at BHCD, and this is a way that in many of our different programs we try to provide additional points given the level of distress that exists in the community.
Great. Susan, you have a question, go ahead.
So I'm just trying to think of time frame. So does this affect the current applications in the hopper, or is it for going forward? I was just wondering who might, if anybody, be harmed if we change that now.
The application deadline isn't until later this year, so we don't have any active applications at this point. So this would be the data that is in front of everyone for this next application cycle.
And just to add, the current applicant pool, this is out there publicly, so they know that this is a proposal of what can change, and got some feedback on that with the stakeholders, localities and developers that apply. So we didn't receive pushback on that, but I just want to let you know so it is out there publicly. You all can tweak that. You can keep it the same, or you can go with this proposed staff change. But it's been out there for our stakeholders.
Other questions on this one? Monique, go ahead.
So in looking through the part of the I guess the guidelines that are stricken, it looks like poverty rate, median household income, and unemployment rate, that section is taken out. So with this new calculation, is there like a baseline? Because it seems like that kind of provided a baseline around which projects were elevated and prioritized. So with this new rating system, I mean, is that still a part of it, or is that kind of baseline no longer a part of the equation?
Yeah, a number of those criteria are still included in the way that the distress scores are calculated.
Yeah, so the poverty rate, I think you just changed the way you calculated it.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were looking at for the poverty rate before was the number of school lunches that are free and reduced school lunches in a locality. But that is not something that's taken into account with ARC, CDBG, and some of the other programs. So it's really moving closer to the way that, again, the way that they calculate those scores. I apologize that there are some things about the way that our policy team has recommended doing this that I'm not going to remember all of the details, but we did work with the policy team, Ali and David Conme, who work with CDBG and our other programs in helping to calculate their distress scores as well.
And I totally understand. And the only reason I ask is because kind of the way it was structured before, it kind of created a baseline of like poverty rate of at least 150% of the state average. So I'm wondering with that new calculation, if those kind of baselines, because I see there's a formula, but it's still kind of hard to tell whether or not there's some like bar the projects are going to have to go get above. And because I'm just thinking that for folks to be able to weed their own selves out of, the running, is there some kind of mechanism in place to kind of establish those?
Well, if you take a look at attachment D, which shows the scoring for each locality, no one is really taken out of the running.
Okay.
With every point category that we have for IRF, any given project is going to score higher in one category than in another category. So if you are a locality that is not highly distressed, you are just going to want to make sure that you are really showing impacts, that you have all of the other financing in order, and that you're scoring more highly in some of those other areas.
Okay.
So there is the opportunity to kind of make it up on the other spots.
Thanks, Monique. Other questions?
Yes, this is Sylvia. I had a quick question. Are any of the projects that have been funded included nonprofits as part of the team?
I'm sorry.
The development team. Have any of the projects included nonprofits as part of the project team, and is there an advantage in that?
Yeah, at least, okay, so I'm thinking of fiscal year 2021. Both of the theater projects that we funded are nonprofit owners and developers there. And then the project in Vinton is a for-profit developer. When it's a nonprofit, there's not a difference in scoring, but again, if it's a nonprofit that owns the building or is the developer or the end use will be through a nonprofit, it's a straight grant. And when it's a for-profit developer who is utilizing that at the end, it's a grant to the locality, and then the locality makes that as a loan to the for-profit developer. So, certainly you can argue that getting it as a straight grant is a benefit over the loan, but when the loan is repaid to the locality can then turn that into a revolving loan fund to continue to have those funds available for these types of projects in the vicinity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Other questions? Okay.
Sorry, Andy.
Oh, go ahead, Claudia.
Just mine's a quick comment. I reached out to some of my friends and EDAs in the area to ask, they are users of the program, have used it in the past, and they felt like the change in the guidelines would not substantively change anything as far as their future applications, and they were supportive. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Right. Thank you, Claudia. Yeah, my personal view of them is that they look like better guidelines. They're not like yes, no, but they have ranges of scoring that are better than you get this, you get points, and if you don't, you get nothing. I think that's a real significant improvement. So I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve the amended guidelines.
So motion.
Thank you, Sunny. A second?
Second.
Okay, got Susan, I guess, or Mark to second it. Then, so I guess Kyle will call the roll on that motion.
Mr. Abbasi,
Approved.
Ms. Cotton,
Yes.
Ms. Dewey,
Yes.
Mr. Friedman,
Yes.
Mr. Gregory, Ms. Hallett,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Ms. Abby Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Keith Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Monique Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Marinoff,
Yes.
and Ms. Shields. Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Kyle. Okay, thank you, Rebecca and Eric, for that information. Appreciate it. And is there any new business from the committee members? Okay, with that, I think we're adjourned. The Housing and Community Development Committee is adjourned. Thank you. Turn it back over to Sunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call the main meeting to order. And Kyle, if you could take a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Abbasi,
Present.
Ms. Cotton,
Present.
Ms. Dewey,
Present.
Mr. Farrell,
Present.
Mr. Friedman,
Present.
Mr. Gregory, Ms. Hallett,
Present.
Mr. Jackson,
Present.
Ms. Abby Johnson,
Present.
Mr. Keith Johnson,
Present.
Ms. Monique Johnson,
Present.
Mr. Marinoff,
Present.
and Ms. Shields. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And then I'd like to open up for public comment. If you've not already indicated to Kyle that you wish to speak, please enter your name in the chat box. We'll begin by calling any individuals who previously indicated they wish to speak. Kyle, if you can announce the individuals who signed up for public comment.
Mr. Chair, no one has previously indicated to me that they wish to speak.
Okay. Is there anybody in the chat box, Kyle?
Do not see anyone. I don't think there's anyone on the phone.
Okay. We'll just give it a few seconds, and I want to make one final call for public comments. Is there anyone on the phone or in the meeting via video that would like to make a public comment? It's a final call. Okay. Hearing nobody, we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from December 14th, 2020. I'd like to recognize Kyle for a roll call vote on the approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, we would need a motion and a second prior to that.
So
Mr. Chairman, this is Sean. I moved approval of the meeting minutes.
I'll
Is there a
second
second?
that.
Second.
Great. So Kyle, if you could move for the approval.
Mr. Abbasi,
Approved.
Ms. Cotton,
Yes.
Ms. Dewey,
Yes.
Mr. Farrell,
Yes.
Mr. Friedman,
Yes.
Mr. Gregory, Ms. Halleck,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Ms. Abby Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Keith Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Monique Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Maringoff,
Yes.
and Ms. Shields. Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the report of the Housing Community Development Committee. I would like to turn it over to the chairman of that committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our meeting just previous to this, we approved the proposal to amend the Industrial Revitalization Fund guidelines as presented by the staff. So I'd like to present that as the report of the Housing and Community Development Committee.
Thank you. And that comes as a motion. I would need a second on that. Since it's coming from the committee, it'll be a motion. Can I get a second for approval of the Industrial Revitalized Fund guidelines?
Second. Abby.
So seconded. Kyle, if you could call the vote, please.
Mr. Abbasi,
Approved.
Ms. Cotton,
Yes.
Ms. Dewey,
Yes.
Mr. Farrell,
Aye.
Mr. Friedman,
Yes.
Mr. Gregory, Ms. Halleck,
yes,
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Ms. Abby Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Keith Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Monique Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Maringoff,
Yes.
and Ms. Shields. Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Moving right along, the next item on the agenda is the code update cycle. Cindy, if you want to present the status of the current update cycle, and then we can ask any questions from the board.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. The status of the current code cycle or code approval process, as you know, you approved the final regulations at your board meeting in December. Those regulations have now been approved by the Attorney General's office and moved to governor's approval. When those come back, they will be published in the Virginia Register with a 30-day comment period. And we have not yet determined a final effective date. We are working on publication dates for the custom codes for Virginia with ICC. We anticipate somewhere around July 1st. We may have to push it back a little bit, but hopefully the effective date will be somewhere in that area. So that's, Mr. Chair, that's the update, current update cycle.
Okay.
And additionally, in your packet, for the benefit of the new board members who were not participants in the proposed phase of the code update cycle, we put together some documents that provides an overview of the 2018 code cycle in total. And that includes a summary of all the significant changes from both the proposed and the final phase, just to give you an idea of some of the more significant items. Obviously, that's not everything, but it is some of the more pertinent ones. And I'm happy to, as you read through those in your packet, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions on those. The changes that maybe affect affordability, I wanted to bring to your attention, and that is the tiny house appendix. That is a compliance path for the construction of tiny homes, intermodal shipping containers, a guideline for construction path to use those in affordable housing, and accessory dwelling units, which was just part of the final one that you probably remember. So those are probably three key proposals that are connected to affordable housing. And then separately, we had put together a resiliency impact analysis on all the proposals for this cycle, along with an energy efficiency analysis over the last several cycles. And so these are related to the resiliency impact analysis is related to Executive Order 24. And the Executive Order 24 required that the 2018 code process take into consideration resiliency, climate change, and sea level rise in developing those codes. So you may recall that we had a subwork group for that function, and they came up with a number of changes recommended by FEMA, bringing forth proposals from the 2021 codes into the 2018 to address resiliency. And then finally, the energy analysis gives you an overview of what has happened in Virginia going back to the 2012 codes and comparing the improvements and updates from the 2012 to the 09 and then to the 15 into the 18. It gives you an idea and gives you some highlights of everything energy efficiency related that has improved in Virginia over the course of the last several cycles. So it also provides an overview of the ACEE rating for the state of Virginia related to the stringency of their codes. And I think you can see we have scored pretty high there. So I am happy to answer any questions. I haven't gotten down into the weeds on any of this. I know it's a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have related to the overview documents that have been provided. And if there aren't questions today, but you have questions later, please feel free to reach out to me with those questions. And that's all I have on the code update process at this time.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a quick comment, if I may.
Please, Andy, go ahead.
So, Cindy, I just want to say that that's a remarkable document. I will admit to not having read the whole thing, but it's really a remarkable amount of detailed work that anyone who wanted to know what happened could learn that. I really appreciate the amount of work and organization that went into it.
Well, thank you. And that goes to my team and my staff. They were remarkable in the amount of research and then the way they were able to put it together in a cohesive manner. So kudos to the SBCO team on that.
Yeah, I would echo what everyone said, and I didn't get through the whole document myself. I think I fell asleep, but it was actually really interesting reading, and I think it'll help us as we look at code changes moving forward also.
Great. Thank you. Are there any further questions for Cindy? Okay, hearing none.
No, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, really quickly. And this may be something, I feel like I should know this, but I'm going to ask anyway because it'll benefit the new board members. I remember in the last code cycle, there was a grandfather period in terms of when developers had to actually start using the new code. Is that the case in this situation, or is that everyone as of July, whatever it goes into final approval, will have to at that point adopt the 2018?
No, there is a 1-year grandfathering.
There is still? Okay, it's just typical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry, can you, Cindy, do you mind explaining what that means specifically?
Sure. The Virginia Code provided a method that projects that were already started certainly don't have to start redesigning to a new code, a new effective date. So the easiest way there would be no way to determine when the design phase started, when the contract was signed, et cetera, et cetera. So just for ease of enforcement, the regulations have been for decades just a very simple 1-year grandfathering period. The applicant has the choice to use either the current code or the one with the effective date.
And so, thank you for explaining that. So does that mean that then if, so they have the choice, but if they pull a permit after that 1-year anniversary, then they are subject to the new code?
That's correct.
The permit, the permit date is that, yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Great.
This is Sean. I just would like to offer a further clarification to Brett's question. If you have plans that are submitted within that 1-year grace period, they can carry over that 1 year because you've essentially started that project by having an approved set of plans within the locality. So there is potential for the locality to provide some flexibility with regards to submission of plans. So if you've started that project and in terms of defining that date, it's when were construction documents submitted, whether they included permits, applications or not. It's when was the construction document submitted.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Are there any additional questions for Cindy or for other members of staff regarding code update cycle? Okay. Hearing none, I'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the various. Sorry, did somebody have a question? So we'll move on to the various reports. The first is Susan Dewey's report, Virginia Housing.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. We're working very closely at Virginia Housing with BHCD on a number of initiatives, including the rent relief program and a report on housing needs, and that's pursuant to House Bill 854. But I am assuming, Eric, nod your head, that you're going to be reporting on those. So I won't, in the interest of time. The other thing, though, I'll just mention, I think I mentioned this last time, but it's very important for our process with the low-income housing tax credit program, a federal program, that we update our qualified allocation plan, which determines how those credits are allocated. And we generally do that on an every other year basis. We didn't do it last year because of COVID, but we are in the process of having forums this year to update that QAP. If anyone's interested, I can get that information to you. But we do like to hear from all of our partners on what changes are needed. So other than that, I think we'll just leave the rest for Eric.
Thank you, Susan. Any questions for Director Dewey? Okay, great. Richard Gregory, are you on for the Fire Services Board report? Okay. Keith, do you want to give a quick report since Richard's not on?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. We have not had a meeting since our last meeting, so there's nothing new to report on the Fire Service Board.
That's probably why Richard didn't show up, because he had nothing. Great. And I just want to note Garrett Dwyer as the new executive director of the Virginia Fire Board. So congratulations to him. Next thing is the report of the Director Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yeah, thank you for mentioning Chief Dwyer's appointment. We've gotten a chance to work with him, and I've already reached out to congratulate him as well. So we're look forward to working with him in that new sister agency. That's a key sister agency role with fire programs. I've got several updates, so I want to make sure even though we just met recently, there's a lot that has transpired since we last met at the end of December in the housing space. So I just want to give you some updates. A couple of things I want to say first, though. We do have a new community vitality series, and I really want to thank board member Monique Johnson for being one of our leaders to kick off that series. And it's a great way to learn even more about our community revitalization effort. And one of the things that we're passionate about at BHCD is the interconnection between all of the work we do in community development and housing. And a lot of that is about leadership and local effort. So thank you, Board Member Johnson, for being there to kick that off. And I do really, her presentation is online along with the whole series. It's in your chat box now. That I would encourage folks to take a look at. It's a really lot of work by the team to put that together and our partners, and it's a really good resource as really, you know, our state and gets into the recovery mode and thinks about not just the challenges of economic development and revitalization pre-pandemic, but also where we are now with the unique challenges we're facing. So just really encourage folks to take a look at that. And just to put in perspective, our economic development lead, Stephen Moray, with VDP, gives a presentation often about the Moody's, and they're predicting by the end of 2022 is when we would potentially get back to economic recovery in our urban areas and metro areas across the nation. And that some of the predictions are that it would be 3 to 4 more years for some of our mid-sized and rural portions of America. And so we really take it seriously that we want to bend those curves and change that in Virginia. And a lot of it, our efforts with our sister agencies and the localities and private sector are going to be critical to that. So just want to let you know about that piece. To tie in there, the governor in his budget does have a proposal to increase our Main Street program from $500,000 to $3.5 million a year to help with the Main Street recovery. And so we're really excited about that effort and happy to share more and could share more as hopefully that funding sticks after the General Assembly process. For anything in the General Assembly process, we don't get our budget finalized till April, but we should know a lot more in March about how things fared on the House and Senate side and where things go. The next piece I want to update you on, we obviously are in the middle of the General Assembly session, and what we typically do for the board is to really give an overview of any legislation that made it through the General Assembly, that's related to your work and your authorities, and also some of the especially bills related to the building code, related to the programs that you're implementing and authorizing guidelines for. In that vein, I did want to recognize Kristen Dahlman. She is our new Legislative and Policy Director. She's been with BHCD for multiple years already, but she has been promoted to be our new Legislative and Policy Director. And so I wanted to make sure you all will get to know her as we also get back in person. And so her team is both the Commission on Local Government team that works on things like the Fiscal Distress Index that you all got to taste to see some in our IRF guidelines, but they also work through all the land use issues that we get involved with studies of the Commission on Local Government. In addition, manages a team on our policy front. Our agency reviews more bills than any other state agency in state government, because anything that touches local government, we're typically assigned to review and kind of take a analysis of those bills. So I want to make sure you get to know that, Kristen. In terms of the General Assembly update, the main thing I'll just say at this moment, I gave you some more updates in the past on the governor's budget, and happy to go through that as well. But it continues with I mentioned the Main Street, the Housing Trust Fund has also an increase to $70.7 million. And the broadband initiative has an increase to stay at the $50 million a year. So those are some of the 3 big efforts in the Housing Trust Fund, Main Street, and the broadband last mile program. But I did want to let you know there is one agency bill that was approved by the governor's office that's working its way through already the House on enterprise zones, which will basically update the enterprise zone authority in the code to pair with the new increases in the Virginia minimum wage, because currently we're tied at the federal minimum wage. So we would be incentivizing jobs not tied to our new minimum wage in Virginia. So just that's more of a technical bill coming through. There are some components of it, though, related to some improvements in terms of increased eligibility for SWAM businesses and a couple policy pieces to that bill as well. So you should be seeing that if it goes through the General Assembly after in terms of updating the regs as well. And there are several bills related to the building code. At this point, it's too early to tell where those bills will go. There's a bill related to mandatory adoption of all of the international model code in terms of the energy code. So just be aware of that. We as a board don't take positions on legislation. Being a gubernatorial appointed board, obviously in your personal lives and part of your associations, you can take positions on anything. But as a board, we don't get involved in the review of the bills and making positions at this point in the process. We will, you though are charged once they come to the General Assembly, using your discretion to where there is with what's passed to implement those, whatever passes with the code updates or programs under your purview. So just want to give you a heads up on those two items. The big update since we last met is that the stimulus package that passed on December 27th and was signed by the president included $25 billion nationally in emergency rental assistance. It also extended the evictions moratorium to January 31st. And so what that means for Virginia is, and we really appreciate the congressional delegation in Virginia and the governor for advocating extensively for those needed funds. Virginia was one of the few states that stood up a statewide rent and mortgage relief program all the way back in June of 2020, given the public health impacts of eviction during the pandemic and the need to protect households during the pandemic. So we had actually continued to run a program after spending $62 million in the CARES Act funds. We were utilizing Housing Trust Fund as a bridge to continue, and still are as of today, to continue Virginia's statewide rent and mortgage relief program. But the new funding means that $568 million in funds will be available for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I mean, to put that in perspective, that's multiple times the size of our agency budget. It is a huge new rental housing assistance coming from the federal government, really focused on both rental assistance. 90% of the funds have to be spent on rental assistance or utility relief. 10% can be used for administration and potentially other housing related programs. But one key component of the bill is that the localities over 200,000 in population were able to decide whether they wanted to administrate their own programs or allow the state to administrate their portion of the funds. And we've been getting calls from across the country from states who don't have programs and are needing to ramp up and create programs because the funds also have to be obligated at least 65% by September of this year. So a huge, very quick timeline. And very huge effort. So a lot of states are starting from scratch. We're very fortunate that we have one. Virginia Housing stepped up, and Susan and I are on calls, feels like daily, and if not 3 or 4 times a day, and our teams even more so, because the level of collaboration to develop what they did was develop a landlord portal where landlords, whatever locality they're operating could take applications and serve their residents and expand our capacity to deliver across the state. I can't thank Susan and her team enough for their leadership. And so that effort is let us, as we got the funds coming to Virginia, to encourage localities to actually allow the state to continue to have a statewide portal as opposed to both a landlord portal through Virginia Housing, and we have a rent and mortgage relief support center for tenants, so that there's 2 doors for one program. And we at this point we know that we'll be operating the program statewide, except in the localities of Fairfax and Chesterfield. So those localities are going to operate their own programs, and we're working to coordinate with them. But in essence, we're going to have somewhere in the 400 million plus statewide for us to manage and get out the door quickly to tenants and landlords across the Commonwealth. One thing to keep in mind is that the federal rules go through the U.S. Treasury Department, and they are similarly aligned to how we have been operating in Virginia in terms of serving households at 80% or less of area median income, with a focus on trying to serve those at 50% or less of AMI first. Our original 62 million that went out, over 90 with the CARES money, over 90% of those funds went to households at 50% or less of AMI, because we're really looking at the income as households present, and many families, regardless of what their income was pre-pandemic, have really, especially in the service sector, have seen those incomes drop significantly. So the key to point out is that we're in the middle of transitioning as quickly as we get the funds to these new emergency rental assistance efforts, and how much of that, how soon we get that, and whether we can supplant some of the old housing trust fund dollars we've spent will impact how much we have for the trust fund for this fiscal year. So we really are really appreciative of, we've got so many great housing partners and the locality leaders. We've got one on the phone who's has been dealing with this throughout the pandemic too, with Andy in Virginia Beach. All of us in housing, state and local, have made this a top priority, and so we're going to be continuing to update you, but just want to make sure you're aware that that's the huge new effort for our agency, and again, Virginia Housing as our equal partner in delivering those resources across the Commonwealth. So before I go on, there's some other updates I want to give, but because that's such a big update, I did want to see if I missed anything, Susan, that you'd want to add, and if anyone had questions at this point.
Eric, this is Andy. Oh, go ahead. Claudia raised her hand.
Oh, thanks, Andy. Eric, I understand that President Biden signed an executive order to extend eviction prohibition till March 31st. Is the state mirroring that in any way, or will that change for Virginia?
You're correct, Claudia. And I think Kristen may have put that in the chat too, that by executive order, the federal moratorium was extended. But then in addition, there's the President Biden's new stimulus package also asked to extend that further out till September. So putting that in Congress, whether that will continue. In terms of whether Virginia will mirror that, in essence, where we are right now is that that we have on stayhomevirginia.com, and I did recommend that to folks. That's our portal for the latest on the evictions and homeowner, I should say, latest on rights and responsibilities for landlords, homeowners, people experiencing homelessness, and renters. But in essence, what the current state budget says is that it's got an eviction language in there, eviction prevention language. It says you have to, landlord and tenant, cooperate and work together to apply for rental assistance before an eviction is possible. It also has some other things like requiring payment plans for to be offered by larger landlords with 5 or more properties. It's got some changes in terms of the notice period from 5 to 14 days on the pay or quit. But in essence, both of those protections, as we understand it, are available to renters and landlords. So we don't necessarily have to pair with that federal protection to have the additional protections on requiring people to, both parties to participate. Because one of the biggest challenges of this program is that both parties, tenant and landlord, have to provide financial information to the Commonwealth to deliver the resources. And so we are, with Virginia Housing's portal, that's really helped, because once they're in and provided, we can continue to provide that rental assistance as people are eligible. So did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Andy, I think you had the next question.
Thank you. Probably more of a comment, but Eric and Susan educated me about this rental assistance program, and we decided to not try to administer it in Virginia Beach. But I don't know if I want to make sure board members understand the scope of this program. That's as Eric said, it's not only multiple times the agency's budget, but they're hiring over 200 staff to do this program and to do it in 9 months or less. So it's a Herculean effort, and I'm particularly happy that they convinced me that we would have to try to do our part in Virginia Beach, so thank you. I think it's going to work out much better statewide.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, we really appreciate your team's partnership on getting those resources out. And you know, one of the big benefits is that landlords working in multiple localities can apply for all their residents on one portal through Virginia Housing, and keep the program similar. We're really trying to screen people in based on eligibility and following the rules, but trying to really get the dollars out and doing an outreach plan that focuses on communities most impacted. We do know that Black and Brown communities have been pre-pandemic more impacted by evictions and more impacted by the pandemic. But in essence, we are really trying to, through our outreach, make sure we're serving all Virginians, and especially those impacted by COVID and the need for rental assistance. But we do have a really tight timeline as well to get the dollars out. Mr. Chair, is there any other questions on the rent relief? I do have just a couple more updates I'd like to make sure the board's aware of.
Sorry, my mic was off. I did have one more comment. I was just going to say, obviously, you know, there's various individuals that are on the board that are involved in various aspects of the housing industry. So to the extent that, you know, I would just urge you to tap on our expertise if we can do anything additional. Sounds like you're on it with Andy already, but, you know, anything else that we can do, let us know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and definitely as you're seeing things, and you all are in different congressional districts and also have expertise in the space. So as you see ideas or hearing things in your region, let us know, and we'll continue to provide updates on the program as it goes along.
Thank you. I think you had some more updates, Director Johnson.
Yeah, just a couple more. I want to make sure, one, that folks are aware that we continue the work group related to the use of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative Fund, housing innovations and energy efficiency, and we've had several work groups related to that. We will receive our first payment from the RGGI auctions in March, and right now the stakeholders are looking at different ways to increase the use of weatherization efforts in the Commonwealth through the weatherization network. With these new funds, also some different ways, looking at different ways on increasing innovation and energy efficiency, and potentially increasing our ability on our rehab and new construction programs to provide more funds to go above code to ensure the long-term costs benefit low-income Virginians in terms of the energy efficiency improvements. So that's a huge other new effort that will be at least $50 million a year flowing through BHCD to those delivering that resource. And that ENCODE is what we'll be working through a stakeholder advisory group, and the governor's office will be approving that final plan. So it's not flowing through this board, but I know many of you are leaders in that space, and some of you have joined that group as public participants. So just wanted to keep you apprised of that. I also want to thank Susan and a team at Virginia Housing for their partnership on the House Bill 854 study. We really have a comprehensive study right now that will be finalized at the end of this year, looking at the housing needs in the Commonwealth, looking at the program delivery in the Commonwealth, and then also some new potential requests for the General Assembly to look at things like rental assistance, etc. And we've added a really big focus on the pandemic impacts on housing, and also racial equity and the focus on ensuring we focus on racial equity in housing. In conjunction, I do want you to be aware as well and welcome Stephanie Patz. We have a JLARC staff member on the call, and JLARC, the Joint Legislative Audit Review Commission, that group the General Assembly is the leadership of that board, and they really do independent research to look at big issues facing the Commonwealth. And so back in November, the JLARC has decided to look into housing, not just what Virginia Housing and BHCD are involved with, but our sister agencies in Health and Human Resources and local government. So they are, beginning scoping their study, and I do want to recognize Stephanie. You may get to know her and her team as well, who are undertaking that study of addressing the housing needs of the Commonwealth. And the last thing I want to say, Mr. Chair, is just to, again, for getting ready for the upcoming months of board meetings, we will be looking at the annual update on the consolidated plan, our HUD program. So we'll be back in the next couple of meetings with some information and likely an approval at the May board meeting on our use of our Community Development Block Grant, Home, Emergency Solution Grant, and HOPWA funds. So those are the main updates I wanted to share with you, and I really appreciate you all making the time for today. And again, you can see we've got a lot of new items on our plate, but we're excited about the focus on housing and community development in the Commonwealth right now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Director Johnson. Are there any additional questions for the director this time? Okay, with that, I'll move on to unfinished business. Do any members have any unfinished business? Do any members have any new business?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Claudia. Go ahead.
Thank you.
You actually raised your hand instead of doing it.
I know. It seems to get as much attention as using the electronic raised hand. So we had an interesting dilemma in our region over the last few weeks that I wanted to share with the group, and I don't have a solution, but I'm hoping perhaps Cindy and her team, and maybe in conjunction with VBCOA, could help with this. We had a local government who had to quarantine all of their inspectors for 14 days. So essentially everyone was scrambling in the building community to find third-party inspections to keep things moving, from large, warehouse job creator centers down to, a remodeler. So it was quite a scramble. Cindy helped me get in touch with a few people that could pinch hit for this locality, but I'm thinking it may never happen again, or it might happen today or tomorrow. So if there is, I don't know what the solution is, but if there is something, Eric and Cindy, that your folks could perhaps at least start thinking about, whether it's a registry for third-party inspectors or something that would help both local government and private builders to address an emergency like that, I think it would really help everybody.
So this is Sean. Claudia, just to address your questions, one of VBCOA's strategic initiatives is to try to get some enabling legislation to be able to do just that. Great. I know that we were successful 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, in an initiative that allowed for some level of job sharing, where, in the event of an emergency, like the earthquake right. is really what drove this when we had the earthquake here 8-10 years ago. For the regulatory community to be responsive to those kinds of emergencies. And so we worked with our legislative team to get something within the Virginia enabling legislation that allows localities to go into agreements with each other in terms of job sharing. Now, there's some liability, some insurance things, hurdles that need to be resolved, but I do think there is some methods that are available to localities, and I do know that VBCOA's team is still working on that strategic initiative for this very purpose. So great point.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And we were aware of that. Unfortunately, everybody's either understaffed or too busy to really be able, to pitch in like that. We did actually reach out to a few localities nearby. So thanks for mentioning that, though.
Sean, this is just, are you aware of localities that are doing some virtual inspections? I some can't be doing virtual, but I thought in Loudon here, some of our building staff were doing some things virtual. Again, I don't know the difference between what exactly, but I know they were doing some.
You're correct, Chief. Not every inspection can be done virtually, but there are some that are doing them. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Claudia. Is there any other members that have any new business?
Mr. Chair, I did want to thank Claudia as well for bringing that forward, and I know Cindy had mentioned the mutual aid, and as well we'll continue to look. I wanted to see if Cindy had anything else to add.
Okay, sure.
Because it is a challenge in those situations, and really the third-party inspectors is one of the main. If your neighboring locality can't come to assistance, we don't currently have resources to send staff ourselves. But I do want to see if Cindy had anything else to add on your comment. But we'll definitely continue to work with VBCOA and appreciate their leadership on items like this, and Chief Johnson's as well on. At the beginning of the pandemic, Cindy and her team did do a lot of work to do efforts on how you can do virtual inspections, and how, when for instance, if a team is quarantined, even if they're still healthy, if there's ways they can continue to be continuity of operations, even if they can't be physically there. But Cindy, did you have anything else?
Thank you, Eric. And to Claudia, I understand the struggle that you all are having. I don't know that I have anything to add other than to say that the regulations do provide that if a community cannot provide the inspections within 48 hours, the contractor can use a third-party inspection agency. Typically, those are engineering firms that have been approved by the locality. I don't know, what the outcome would be on the payment of those third-party agencies and engineering firms. I'm not sure. That would have to be between the contractor and the locality, but there is a provision that can be utilized if the inspections cannot be done. As you indicated, I did try to think of everybody that I knew that had been retired and had kept their credentials up and might be willing to fill in temporarily. I think some of those had some concerns about liability, so that while they may have been willing to perform, they were hesitant to do so. I'm not sure what we can do to that end, but I do know that VBCOA continues to seek methods to help each other in the profession, and we will continue to explore avenues as well.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Cindy, for the additional information. Are there any other new business from board members? Hearing none. Next item is board matters. I'd like to recognize Kyle for an item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to remind board members the annual financial disclosure for the Ethics Council is due 1st of February, and I will make sure another auto-generated email goes out, a reminder later this week. And also, if you haven't let me know, please do let me know if you, as board members, you get custom ICC books, which include the Virginia amendments, and you can get those either in hard copy or digital. So if you haven't let me know, please let me know which method you prefer. You can just reach out to me directly. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyle. And I recognized Director Johnson again for future board meeting dates.
Thanks. And for the new board members, if you haven't had to fill out the conflict of interest, just reach out to Kyle on that February 1st. If it doesn't get turned in, they do fine you $250. But it's, if you need any technical assistance, let us know. And on the date of the next board meeting, it's March 15th at 10 a.m. And I do expect a lighter agenda in terms of length of time again, but I would hold that 3-hour meeting if you can, and hopefully it'll be more like an hour and a half to 2. But we'll keep you apprised as items might come up that we need to add to the agenda. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That takes us through the entire agenda. At this point, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn, Keith.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, Kyle, I'm assuming we don't need a roll call on adjourning. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed to adjourning? Nope. Great. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.